The house felt different when Natasha walked through the front door that Tuesday evening. Something was wrong, but she couldn't place what exactly had changed. The familiar smell of coffee wasn't there. Roberto's shoes weren't by the entrance where he always kicked them off after work. The silence stretched through their home like a heavy blanket, pressing down on her chest as she called his name. Roberto? Babe, are you home? Nothing. She set her purse on the kitchen counter and noticed the laptop was gone. Roberto's laptop that he never took anywhere except work. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her bank. Fraud alert. Large withdrawal detected on your account ending in 4729. If this was not you, please contact us immediately. Her hands started shaking as she read the message again. $4,000. Gone. She rushed to the bedroom, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The closet door hung open, half empty. His side of the dresser had been cleared out completely. Every drawer pulled open and emptied. That's when she saw the note. It sat on his pillow, folded once with her name written across the front in his neat handwriting. The same handwriting that had written, "I love you" in birthday cards and anniversary letters for 8 years. But this note felt different. Cold. Final. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. Natasha, I'm done pretending. This marriage was a mistake from the beginning. I never loved you anyway. Don't look for me. I'm starting over with someone who actually makes me happy. The house and bills are your problem now. Roberto. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She read it again, hoping she had misunderstood. But there it was, in black ink, destroying 8 years of marriage with one paragraph. The man who had promised to love her forever had just walked away like she meant nothing. Her phone buzzed again. Another fraud alert. This time for $7,000. Natasha collapsed onto the bed, still holding the note. The room spun around her as the reality hit. Roberto hadn't just left her. He had robbed her. Cleaned out their accounts and disappeared with another woman while she was at work, trusting him completely. She looked around their bedroom, seeing it differently now. The missing picture frames from his nightstand. The empty space where his watch collection used to sit. Even his phone charger was gone. This wasn't a sudden decision. He had planned this carefully. Her phone rang. The bank's fraud department. Mrs. Torres? This is Jennifer from First National Bank. We're calling about several large transactions on your joint checking account. Are you aware of these withdrawals? No, Natasha whispered, her voice barely working. My husband, he left. I think he took everything. Ma'am, I'm seeing withdrawals totaling $18,000 over the past 3 days. All from ATMs in different locations across the city. We need you to come in immediately to file a fraud report. $18,000. Their entire savings. Money they had saved for a down payment on a bigger house. Money from her bonus at work. Money from selling her grandmother's jewelry. All gone. Mrs. Torres? Are you there? Yes, I'm here. I'll be right there. She ended the call and sat in the silence of their bedroom. 8 years of marriage reduced to an empty closet and a cruel note. But as the shock began to wear off, something else started building inside her. Not just hurt or sadness. Anger. Pure burning anger. Roberto thought he could destroy her life and walk away without consequences. He thought she would just accept his betrayal and move on quietly. He thought wrong. Natasha stood up, wiped her tears and grabbed her car keys. If Roberto wanted to play games, she would play too. But she was going to win. The bank parking lot was nearly empty when she arrived. Jennifer from the fraud department met her at the customer service desk with a stack of papers and a sympathetic expression. I'm so sorry this happened to you, Mrs. Torres. Unfortunately, we see this more often than you'd think. Spouses cleaning out joint accounts before filing for divorce. He hasn't filed for divorce, Natasha said, signing the fraud report. He just left a note and disappeared. Jennifer's expression changed. That's different. If he's taking money without your consent and abandoning the marriage, that could be criminal fraud, not just a civil matter. What do you mean? Joint accounts give both parties legal access to the funds, but if he's using the money to facilitate abandoning his legal obligations as a spouse, that changes things. Especially if he's moved the money somewhere you can't access it. Natasha felt a spark of hope. So this might be illegal? Very possibly. You should contact the police and a lawyer immediately. We'll cooperate fully with any investigation. As Natasha drove home through the dark streets, her mind raced. Roberto had made a mistake. He thought she would be too heartbroken to fight back. He thought she would just let him destroy her life and disappear. But Natasha had spent 8 years believing in their marriage, working hard and building a life together. She wasn't going to let him steal her future without a fight. If Roberto wanted to play dirty, she would show him exactly what he had lost when he decided to betray her. The house felt even emptier when she returned, but now it felt like a starting point instead of an ending. Tomorrow she would begin fighting back. Tonight, she would plan exactly how to make Roberto regret the day he decided to underestimate her. Natasha barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Roberto's note or remembered another missing item from their home. By 6 in the morning, she was already dressed and calling the police department. "I need to report a theft," she told the dispatcher. "My husband cleaned out our bank accounts and disappeared." 2 hours later, Detective James Morrison sat across from her at the kitchen table, reviewing the fraud report from the bank. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and a professional manner that made her feel like someone was finally taking this seriously. "Mrs. Torres, I have to be honest with you. Spouse theft cases are complicated because of joint account access. But there are some things here that concern me." He spread out copies of the bank statements on the table. "Look at this pattern. These withdrawals didn't start 3 days ago. They go back 2 weeks. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. This suggests premeditation." Natasha leaned forward, studying the papers. "I never saw these smaller withdrawals. We each handle our own daily expenses, so I wouldn't have noticed 100 here and there." That's what he was counting on. But this pattern, combined with his disappearance, could constitute fraud and potentially abandonment charges. The fact that he liquidated your joint savings while planning to leave changes the legal situation. Detective Morrison pulled out a notebook. "I need you to tell me everything about the past few weeks. Any changes in his behavior, new friends, unexplained absences, anything unusual." Natasha thought back through the recent weeks, seeing them differently now. He'd been working late more often. Said his company was launching a new project. He was on his phone constantly, texting someone. When I asked about it, he said it was work stuff. "Did you ever see the messages?" "No, he always kept his phone face down and took it with him everywhere. Even to the bathroom." She paused, remembering something else. "About a month ago, he started talking about how unhappy he was with his job. Said he wanted to make a fresh start somewhere else." Detective Morrison made notes. "What kind of work does he do?" "He's an accountant at Morrison Financial Services. He handles their client accounts and payroll systems." The detective's pen stopped moving. "He has access to other people's money?" "Yes, he's been there for 5 years. They trust him completely." A cold feeling settled in her stomach. "You don't think he—" "I think we need to expand this investigation. Mrs. Torres, I want you to gather every financial document you can find. Bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns, anything that shows money movement. Also, make a list of everything valuable that's missing from your home." After Detective Morrison left, Natasha spent the day going through every file in Roberto's home office. What she found made her sick to her stomach. Hidden in the back of his filing cabinet were bank statements for an account she didn't know existed. An account in both their names that he had opened 6 months ago. The statements showed regular deposits of $500 to $2,000, always in cash. The final balance before closure was $43,000. Where had this money come from? She called Detective Morrison immediately. "That's very interesting, Mrs. Torres. Can you bring those statements to the station? And I have some news. I contacted Morrison Financial Services to verify his employment. They haven't seen Roberto in 4 days. He called in sick Monday and Tuesday, then stopped responding to calls entirely. So he's been lying to them too? It appears so. They're concerned because he was supposed to process payroll this week, and several client payments are unaccounted for. They're conducting an internal audit now." Natasha felt dizzy. This was so much bigger than a cheating husband. Roberto had been stealing money from multiple sources and planning his escape for months. "Detective Morrison, how much trouble is he in? If my suspicions are correct, he's looking at federal charges. Fraud, embezzlement, possibly identity theft if he opened accounts using your information without consent. This isn't just a divorce matter anymore, Mrs. Torres. This is serious criminal activity." That evening, Natasha's best friend Monica came over with wine and takeout Chinese food. Monica had been Roberto's biggest critic from the beginning of their relationship, always saying something felt off about him. "I hate to say I told you so," Monica said, pouring wine into 2 glasses, "but I always knew he was hiding something. Remember when we ran into him at that restaurant last year and he acted so strange?" "What restaurant?" Natasha asked. "The Italian place downtown. You were visiting your mom that weekend. I saw Roberto there with some woman." When I waved, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Later he told you he was working late that night. Natasha's heart sank. The affair had been going on for over a year. Why didn't you tell me? I tried to hint at it, but you were so happy. And I wasn't completely sure. But now... Monica gestured at the financial documents spread across the coffee table. This is so much worse than I thought. They spent the evening making lists of everything Natasha could remember about Roberto's recent behavior. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the new clothes he'd bought but claimed were gifts from his company. The expensive watch that appeared on his wrist with some story about a bonus. You know what bothers me most? Natasha said around midnight, after they'd finished going through everything. He wrote that he never loved me anyway. But if that was true, why stay married for 8 years? Why pretend? Monica refilled their wine glasses. Because he was using you, honey. Your good credit, your stable job, your trust. He needed you to build his escape plan. So our entire marriage was fake? His part was. But your love was real. Your commitment was real. Don't let his lies make you doubt yourself. As Monica helped clean up the documents, she paused over one of the secret bank statements. Natasha, look at this deposit date. March 15th. Wasn't that when you got your work bonus? Natasha looked at the statement. A cash deposit for $3,500 on March 16th, one day after her bonus hit their joint account. He took my bonus money and put it in his secret account. That's not just theft from the marriage, honey. That's theft from you personally. Lying in bed that night, Natasha stared at the ceiling and thought about the past 8 years. Had any of it been real? Had Roberto ever actually loved her? Or had she been nothing more than a convenient cover for his criminal activities? But as hurt as she was, the anger was stronger now. Roberto had stolen her money, her trust, and 8 years of her life. He thought he could just disappear and leave her to deal with the consequences of his crimes. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The next morning brought more devastating news. Detective Morrison called before Natasha had even finished her coffee. Mrs. Torres, Morrison Financial Services completed their internal audit. Roberto embezzled at least $60,000 from client accounts over the past 8 months. They're filing criminal charges today. Natasha sank into her kitchen chair. $60,000? That's just what they've found so far. The FBI is taking over the financial crimes investigation. Agent Sarah Chen will be contacting you today. An hour later, Agent Chen sat in Natasha's living room with a laptop and several thick folders. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an intensity that made Natasha feel both nervous and hopeful. Mrs. Torres, your husband's crimes go beyond simple embezzlement. We've traced the money through several accounts, and the pattern suggests this was a long-term operation. He was very methodical. Agent Chin opened her laptop and showed Natasha a flowchart of bank accounts and money transfers. Roberto opened 7 different accounts over the past year using various combinations of your joint information. He deposited stolen money, let it sit for a few weeks to avoid immediate detection, then transferred it to accounts we haven't located yet. How is that possible? He's good with numbers and knows how banks work. But he made mistakes. The paper trail exists and we're following it. What I need from you is help understanding his personal patterns. Where would he go? Who would he trust? What names or places were significant to him? Natasha thought about Roberto's habits and preferences. His brother lives in Phoenix, but they don't get along. His ex-girlfriend from college lives in Atlanta, but I thought that was over years ago. What was her name? Victoria Rodriguez. But Roberto always said she was crazy and he'd never talk to her again. Agent Chin made a note. Men who commit fraud often reconnect with old relationships as part of their escape plan. Victoria Rodriguez in Atlanta? Yes, she works for some marketing company. She used to send him friend requests on social media, but he always ignored them. Natasha paused, remembering something. Wait. About 6 months ago, Roberto got a friend request from someone named Vicky R. He said he didn't know who it was, but now Victoria Rodriguez could use Vicky as a nickname. Did he accept the request? I don't know. He deleted it from his notifications right away. Agent Chin typed rapidly on her laptop. Mrs. Torres, I need access to any computers, tablets, or storage devices Roberto used. Even if he deleted things, we might be able to recover them. They spent the next 2 hours going through Roberto's home office and the shared computer. Agent Chin installed software that began recovering deleted files immediately. Look at this, she said after 30 minutes. Deleted browser history from 3 months ago. Airline websites, hotel bookings in Atlanta, and searches for how to open offshore bank accounts. Natasha watched the screen fill with evidence of Roberto's planning. He had researched everything from fake identification to countries without extradition treaties. This wasn't a spontaneous decision to leave his marriage. This was a carefully planned escape from multiple criminal activities.'There's more,' Agent Chen said, opening a recovered email folder. Messages between Roberto and someone using the email address vicrod2024@gmail.com. The emails made Natasha sick to read. Not just because they proved Roberto's affair, but because they showed how coldly he had planned to destroy her life. "The money situation is handled," Roberto had written in one email. "She has no idea about the extra accounts. By the time she figures it out, we'll be long gone." Victoria had responded, "What about the house and her job? Won't she try to track us? She's too trusting and not that smart. She'll probably just cry and move on. Women like her always do." Natasha felt rage building in her chest. Roberto hadn't just stolen money from her. He had completely underestimated her intelligence and strength. Agent Chen continued scrolling through the emails. "Here's something interesting. Roberto mentions the offshore account setup and references someone named Tony who's helping with documentation." Tony? Could be someone who creates false identification or helps with illegal money transfers. Roberto was planning to disappear completely and assume a new identity. The investigation expanded throughout the day. Agent Chen's team traced Roberto's digital footprints across multiple states and discovered he had been building his criminal operation for over a year. Every detail had been planned, from the timing of his departure to the accounts where he'd hidden the stolen money. "Mrs. Torres, your husband was running what we call a long con. He used his legitimate job and marriage as cover while systematically stealing from multiple sources. This level of planning suggests he's done this before." "Before? You mean with other women?" "It's possible. We're checking his background for similar patterns in previous relationships or jobs." That evening, Monica came over again, bringing pizza and moral support. She found Natasha sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by financial documents and evidence bags. "Honey, you look exhausted." "Monica, I feel so stupid. How did I not see any of this? 8 years of marriage, and I never suspected he was a criminal." Monica sat down on the floor beside her. "Because you loved him and trusted him. That's not stupidity, that's what marriage is supposed to be. But all those signs. The secret phone calls, the late nights, the new clothes. I should have known something was wrong. Roberto is a professional liar, Natasha. He fooled his employers, his clients, and probably other women before you. Don't blame yourself for believing someone you loved." They ordered ice cream for dessert and tried to watch a comedy movie, but Natasha couldn't concentrate. Her mind kept racing through 8 years of memories, wondering which moments had been real and which had been part of Roberto's elaborate deception. Around 11 o'clock her phone rang. "Agent Chen. Mrs. Torres, we found them. Roberto and Victoria are in Atlanta, using credit cards linked to one of the hidden accounts. We're coordinating with local law enforcement for arrests tomorrow morning." Natasha's heart started racing. They're really going to arrest him? Multiple federal charges, Mrs. Torres. Embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. He's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. After the call ended, Natasha sat in her living room feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice was coming, but it couldn't repair the damage Roberto had done to her ability to trust or give her back 8 years of her life. But as she looked around their home, seeing it without Roberto's presence, she realized something important. She was stronger than he had believed. Smart enough to gather evidence, brave enough to fight back, and resilient enough to build a new life from the ashes of his betrayal. Roberto had made the biggest mistake of his criminal career when he underestimated her. Agent Chen called at 7 in the morning with an update that made Natasha's coffee taste even more bitter. "The arrest is delayed. Roberto and Victoria checked out of their Atlanta hotel yesterday evening. But we're tracking their movements through ATM withdrawals and credit card usage. They're heading south, possibly toward Florida. How much money do they have access to? That's the problem. We've frozen the accounts we know about, but Roberto was smart. He likely has cash stockpiles and accounts we haven't discovered yet. The forensic accounting team is working around the clock to trace every transaction." Natasha dressed quickly and drove to the FBI field office. Agent Chen led her to a conference room where 3 other agents were studying financial documents spread across a large table. "Mrs. Torres, meet Agent Williams and Agent Jackson from our Financial Crimes Unit, and Detective Morrison, who's been coordinating with local police." The evidence was overwhelming. Charts showed money flowing from Morrison Financial Services through multiple bank accounts, ATMs withdrawals across 3 states, and a complex web of financial transactions that painted Roberto as a sophisticated criminal. Your husband has been stealing systematically for at least 18 months, Agent Williams explained. Small amounts at first to test security systems, then larger amounts as he gained confidence. But why? Natasha asked. He had a good job, we lived comfortably. Why risk everything? Detective Morrison looked up from his notes. We ran a background check on Roberto's previous employment. He was fired from 2 accounting firms in other states for irregularities in client accounts. No charges were filed because the companies wanted to avoid publicity. So he's done this before? Multiple times. Roberto Torres is what we call a career financial criminal. He gets hired at accounting firms, builds trust over several years, then systematically steals until he's ready to disappear. Agent Chen pulled out a thick folder. The pattern is consistent. He targets smaller firms where oversight is limited, marries or dates women with good credit and stable jobs to provide cover, then vanishes when the heat gets too intense. Natasha felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Are you saying I wasn't his first victim? We're investigating a woman named Linda Patterson in Kansas City who reported similar circumstances 3 years ago. Her husband, using the name Robert Torres, disappeared with their savings and money stolen from his accounting firm. The room started spinning. Natasha gripped the edge of the table. Robert Torres? Roberto Torres? He's the same person? We believe so. Different first name but same last name, same profession, same methods. Linda Patterson never found him, but she provided us with photos that match your husband's description. Agent Chin opened her laptop and showed Natasha a police report from Kansas City. The details were almost identical. Disappearance after cleaning out joint bank accounts, embezzlement from an accounting firm, a cruel goodbye note, and a secret relationship with another woman. The woman in Kansas City was named Vanessa Rodriguez. Sister of Victoria Rodriguez, the woman he's with now. Natasha stared at the screen in shock. Sisters? Roberto planned this with sisters? Family operations are common in financial fraud. Victoria and Vanessa Rodriguez appear to be professional accomplices who help Roberto identify targets and execute his escape plans. Detective Morrison slid another document across the table. Mrs. Torres, this is important. Linda Patterson never recovered her money because she didn't have enough evidence to prove criminal intent. But you do. The email communications, the systematic theft patterns, the premeditated planning, we have everything we need to prosecute him successfully. What does that mean for me? It means you're going to get justice and you're going to get your money back, Agent Chin said firmly. Roberto made a mistake this time. He got careless because he thought you wouldn't fight back. The afternoon was spent reviewing financial evidence and giving detailed statements about Roberto's behavior patterns. Natasha learned that the FBI had been investigating the Rodriguez sisters for over a year as suspected accomplices in multiple fraud cases across several states. Victoria Rodriguez works for a marketing company, but her real job appears to be identifying wealthy targets for Roberto to marry or date, Agent Williams explained. She uses social media and dating apps to find women with good jobs and financial stability. So my entire relationship was fake from the beginning? Possibly. Roberto likely researched you for months before engineering your first meeting. Do you remember how you met? Natasha thought back 8 years. At a coffee shop near my office. He was sitting alone reading a financial magazine. I complimented his choice of reading material, and we started talking about investments. Agent Chin made notes. Classic approach. He positioned himself where you'd see him, with props that would appeal to someone with financial interests. Very calculated. By evening, Natasha felt emotionally drained but strangely relieved. The truth was horrific, but at least she understood now that none of Roberto's betrayal was her fault. She had been targeted by a professional criminal who made a living destroying women's lives. Monica met her for dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown. I can't believe this is real, Monica said after Natasha explained the day's revelations. Roberto wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a career criminal who targeted you specifically. The FBI thinks he might have 3 or 4 other victims in different states. Women who trusted him completely while he stole their money and broke their hearts. But you're the one who's going to stop him. Natasha looked across the restaurant at other couples sharing dinner, wondering how many of them truly knew their partners. Agent Chin says my case is the strongest they've seen. All the evidence, all the financial records, everything they need to put him away for decades. Good. He deserves to rot in prison for what he's done to you and those other women. As they drove home through the city lights, Natasha realized something important had changed inside her. The devastating heartbreak was being replaced by something harder and more powerful. Determination. Roberto had underestimated her intelligence, her strength, and her ability to fight back. He was about to learn exactly how costly that mistake would be. "Monica," she said as they pulled into her driveway, "I want to do more than just get justice for myself. I want to help find his other victims and make sure he never does this to anyone else." That sounds like the Natasha I know. Roberto picked the wrong woman to mess with. The next morning brought unexpected news. Agent Chen called with excitement in her voice that Natasha hadn't heard before. "Mrs. Torres, we got a break in the case. Roberto and Victoria used a credit card at a gas station in Tampa yesterday evening. Local police are coordinating surveillance at airports and major highways." "Does that mean they're trapped?" "Not yet, but their options are getting limited. More importantly, the forensic accounting team found something big. Roberto has been using your social security number to open additional accounts without your knowledge." Natasha felt her stomach drop. Identity theft too? 7 different accounts across 4 states, all using your information but with his access only. This is federal identity theft on top of everything else. The charges are mounting, Mrs. Torres. An hour later, Natasha sat in Agent Chen's office reviewing the evidence of identity theft. Roberto had used her personal information to establish credit lines, open savings accounts, and even apply for business loans. The total amount of identity theft exceeds $200,000, Agent Chen explained. Roberto was building a financial empire using your credit and legal identity. How is that possible? Wouldn't the banks notice? He's sophisticated. Started small, established good payment patterns, then gradually increased his activities. To banks, it looked like you were simply expanding your financial portfolio. Detective Morrison joined them with a folder of new evidence. "Mrs. Torres, we've been in contact with Linda Patterson in Kansas City. She's flying here tomorrow to help with the investigation." "She's coming here?" "She wants to help build the case against Roberto. Plus, she's identified additional evidence from her relationship that connects to your situation." The idea of meeting another woman Roberto had destroyed felt both terrifying and necessary. Natasha needed to understand the full scope of his criminal activities. That afternoon, Monica took time off work to accompany Natasha to the FBI office for another round of evidence review. They sat in the conference room while Agent Chen explained the investigation's expansion. "We've identified at least 3 other potential victims in different states. Women who reported similar circumstances but didn't have enough evidence to pursue criminal charges." "3 more women?" Monica asked, incredulous. "Possibly more. Roberto's criminal activities span at least 5 years across multiple states. He's been perfecting his methods with each victim." Agent Williams spread out a timeline showing Roberto's movements over the past 5 years. Kansas City, Denver, Phoenix, and now their city. Each location showed the same pattern. Establish employment at an accounting firm, meet and marry a professional woman, steal systematically for 18 to 24 months, then disappear. The Rodriguez sisters have been involved in at least 3 of these operations, Agent Chen added. Victoria was the accomplice here and in Phoenix. Vanessa handled Kansas City and Denver. Natasha studied the timeline, seeing her life reduced to dates and locations on an FBI chart. How many women has he done this to? We're still investigating, but possibly 7 or 8 over the past decade. That evening, Natasha and Monica sat on the back porch drinking wine and trying to process the magnitude of Roberto's crimes. 8 women, Monica said quietly. 8 lives destroyed by one man and his accomplices. Agent Chen says some of them never recovered financially. One woman lost her house, another had to declare bankruptcy. But you're going to be different. You caught him, you fought back, and you're going to make sure he pays for all of it. Natasha looked up at the stars, thinking about the other women Roberto had betrayed. I keep wondering about them. Are they okay? Do they blame themselves like I did? Probably. But you're giving them something they never had: justice. The next morning, Linda Patterson arrived from Kansas City. She was a tall woman in her early 40s with sad eyes but a determined handshake. When she hugged Natasha in the FBI conference room, both women started crying. I never thought I'd meet someone else who survived Robert, Linda said, using the name Roberto had given her. Agent Chen says you've been helping with evidence gathering. Everything I have. Bank records, photos, emails, even recordings of phone calls where he lied about working late. I saved it all, hoping someday I'd find him. Linda opened a briefcase filled with organized documents. Robert told me the same things he told you. That our marriage was a mistake, that he'd never loved me, that I was too stupid to understand what was happening. The cruel goodbye note? Almost identical to yours. Agent Chin showed me a copy. Same handwriting, same tone, same lies. They spent the day comparing their experiences with Roberto. The similarities were stunning and heartbreaking. Same romantic techniques during courtship, same gradual isolation from friends and family, same financial manipulation disguised as shared planning. He told me I was the love of his life, Linda said. That he'd never been happier than our first year together. He said the same things to me. Made me feel like I was special, like our connection was unique. Agent Chin listened to their conversation while taking notes. Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Torres, your experiences are helping us understand Roberto's psychological profile. He's not just a financial criminal, he's a predator who targets specific types of women. What do you mean? Natasha asked. Professional women with stable careers, good credit, and limited family connections who might notice inconsistencies. Women who are trusting by nature and want to believe in lasting love. Linda nodded sadly. I moved to Kansas City for my job 6 months before I met Robert. I didn't know many people, was focused on building my career and was lonely. I was the same, Natasha realized. New promotion at work, had just bought my house, was ready to settle down with someone serious. Roberto studies his targets carefully, Agent Chin explained. He identifies women in transitional life phases who are emotionally vulnerable to his manipulation techniques. As the investigation continued, more evidence emerged. Financial records showing Roberto's systematic theft patterns, communication records proving coordination with the Rodriguez sisters, and documentation of his false identities across multiple states. Mrs. Torres, Mrs. Patterson, I want you both to know that your cooperation is building the strongest case our financial crimes unit has ever assembled. Roberto Torres and his accomplices are going to prison for a very long time. But for Natasha, the investigation had become about more than just punishment. It was about making sure Roberto never destroyed another woman's life. Agent Chen called early Thursday morning with news that made Natasha's hands shake. Roberto surfaced. He used a credit card at a luxury hotel in Miami Beach yesterday evening. But there's something else. The hotel manager called police because Roberto tried to pay for a week-long stay with a check from Morrison Financial Services. He's still stealing from his old company? Worse. We contacted Morrison Financial, and they discovered Roberto had remote access to their computer systems until yesterday. He's been continuing to embezzle money even after disappearing. Natasha sat down heavily in her kitchen chair. Roberto's crimes kept expanding beyond anything she could have imagined. Mrs. Torres, I need you to come in today. Morrison Financial CEO wants to meet with you. 2 hours later, Natasha sat in the FBI conference room across from Robert Morrison, a distinguished man in his 60s who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Mrs. Torres, I owe you an apology, he began. Roberto Torres was stealing from our company for months and we had no idea. Your investigation exposed a massive security breach that could have destroyed our business. Agent Chin opened a laptop showing financial records. Mr. Morrison, can you explain what Roberto had access to? Everything. Client accounts, payroll systems, investment portfolios. We trusted him completely. He processed millions of dollars in transactions every month. Natasha felt sick. How much did he steal from your company? So far, we've identified $400,000 in missing funds. But the audit isn't complete. It could be much more. Mr. Morrison pulled out his own folder of documents. Mrs. Torres, Roberto was stealing from our biggest clients. Retirement accounts, college savings funds, business operating expenses. Families are going to lose money because we trusted the wrong person. But you'll get the money back, right? Natasha asked. Some of it. Our insurance will cover part of the losses, but not everything. Some of our clients may never recover their full savings. Agent Chin leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, this is important for the criminal case. Are you willing to testify about the scope of Roberto's access and the systematic nature of his theft? Absolutely. Roberto Torres is a predator who destroyed trust that took decades to build. I want him in prison for the rest of his life. The meeting continued for 2 hours as Mr. Morrison detailed Roberto's responsibilities and the security systems he had violated. The evidence showed Roberto had been planning his theft for over a year, gradually increasing his access and testing security protocols. He was very patient, Mr. Morrison explained. Started with small discrepancies that looked like computer errors. When nobody noticed, he got bolder. Did other employees suspect anything? Natasha asked. One did. Jennifer Walsh from our compliance department mentioned inconsistencies in some of Roberto's reports about 6 months ago. I should have listened to her concerns. Agent Chin made notes. We'd like to interview Jennifer Walsh. Her observations might help establish timeline and criminal intent. After Mr. Morrison left, Agent Chin showed Natasha the expanded evidence chart. Roberto's crimes now involved multiple companies, dozens of individual victims, and financial losses exceeding $600,000. Mrs. Torres, your husband wasn't just stealing from you and his employers. He was running a criminal enterprise that affected hundreds of people. Hundreds. Every client account he touched, every payroll he manipulated, every false transaction he processed. The scope is massive. That afternoon, Natasha met Jennifer Walsh, the compliance officer who had first suspected Roberto's activities. Jennifer was a sharp woman in her 40s with an eye for detail that had potentially saved Morrison Financial from even greater losses. I knew something was wrong with Roberto's reports, Jennifer explained. Numbers that didn't add up, client accounts with unusual activity patterns, discrepancies between what he reported and what actually happened. Why didn't anyone investigate sooner? Natasha asked. Roberto was charming and convincing. When I raised concerns, he always had explanations that sounded reasonable. Plus, he was well liked by everyone, including Mr. Morrison. Jennifer pulled out a notebook filled with handwritten observations. I started keeping detailed notes about 6 months ago. Dates, times, specific transactions that seemed suspicious. I was building a case to present to Mr. Morrison when Roberto disappeared. Agent Chin reviewed Jennifer's notes. This is excellent documentation. Your observations establish a clear pattern of deliberate criminal activity. Mrs. Torres, I'm so sorry about what Roberto did to you personally. When the FBI told us about your situation, I felt terrible that we didn't catch him sooner. You tried to warn people. That's more than anyone else did. As the evidence mounted, Natasha realized Roberto's crimes extended far beyond her personal betrayal. He had systematically stolen from dozens of families, destroyed a company's reputation, and violated the trust of everyone who knew him. Agent Chin, what happens to all the people he stole from? The families who lost their savings. That's why this case is so important. If we recover the stolen money and get convictions, there's a chance most victims will get their money back through asset forfeiture and restitution orders. So stopping Roberto helps everyone he hurt? Exactly. Your courage in fighting back isn't just getting you justice. It's helping dozens of other victims get their lives back too. That evening, Monica found Natasha in her living room surrounded by legal documents and evidence files. How are you holding up with all this? It's overwhelming. Every day we discover Roberto hurt more people. I can't believe I was married to someone so evil. Monica sat beside her on the couch. But look what you've accomplished. 6 weeks ago, you thought you were just a woman whose husband cheated and left. Now you've helped the FBI build a case that's going to put away a career criminal and help dozens of victims. I never wanted to be a hero, Monica. I just wanted my husband to love me. I know, honey. But sometimes the biggest heroes are people who just refuse to give up when terrible things happen to them. Natasha looked at the evidence spread across her coffee table. Bank records, email printouts, financial charts, and testimonies from other victims. It represented months of pain and betrayal, but also something else. Proof that she was stronger than Roberto had believed, smarter than he had calculated, and more determined than he had ever imagined. Roberto had made a fatal error when he decided to underestimate her. Now he was about to pay the price for that mistake. Friday morning brought the call Natasha had been waiting for. Agent Chen's voice was barely controlled excitement. We found Roberto's main account. $2.3 million in an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands. The account was opened 18 months ago using false documentation. $2 million? Natasha could barely comprehend the amount. Money stolen from multiple companies and individuals over several years. Mrs. Torres, this proves Roberto isn't just a small-time criminal. He's been running a major financial fraud operation. Natasha drove to the FBI office where the conference room had been transformed into a command center. Multiple agents worked at computers while Detective Morrison coordinated with law enforcement agencies across several states. Mrs. Torres, Agent Williams called her over to his computer. We've traced Roberto's activities back 7 years. Look at this timeline. The screen showed a map of the United States with pins marking Roberto's locations and crimes over time. Seattle, Portland, Denver, Kansas City, Phoenix, and finally her city. Each pin represented a destroyed life and stolen money. He's been moving systematically across the country, perfecting his methods with each victim, Agent Williams explained. The amount stolen increased with each operation as he gained confidence and experience. Agent Chin joined them with a thick folder. Mrs. Torres, we've located 3 more victims willing to testify. Women from Seattle, Portland, and Phoenix who want to help put Roberto away. They're all coming here? Next week. We're building what's called a pattern case showing that Roberto's crimes weren't isolated incidents but part of a deliberate criminal enterprise. The evidence was staggering. Financial records, communication intercepts, travel documents, and testimonies from victims and employers painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal who had spent years perfecting his methods. The Rodriguez sisters have been involved in at least 5 of these operations, Agent Chin continued. Victoria and Vanessa take turns playing the role of Roberto's lover, depending on which sister fits the target demographic better. So everything about his relationship with Victoria was fake too? Completely fabricated. Victoria Rodriguez has helped Roberto target and destroy at least 6 women over the past 5 years. She's as much a predator as he is. Detective Morrison approached with news from the search teams. Roberto and Victoria checked out of their Miami hotel yesterday, but they left a paper trail. Hotel staff found documents in their room that show they're planning to leave the country. Where are they going? Flight manifests show they have tickets to Costa Rica departing tomorrow evening from Fort Lauderdale Airport. We're coordinating with airport security and U.S. Marshals for the arrest. The room buzzed with activity as agents prepared for Roberto's capture. Natasha felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. After weeks of investigation, justice was finally within reach. Mrs. Torres, Agent Chin said, I want you to understand what's going to happen when we arrest Roberto. This case will likely go to federal court with multiple charges. The trial could take months. What kind of charges? Wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, money laundering, embezzlement, conspiracy, and violation of computer fraud laws. He's looking at 25 to 30 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. That afternoon, Linda Patterson called from Kansas City with encouraging news. Natasha, I talked to 2 other women Roberto victimized. They want to join our testimony for the trial. We're going to show the jury exactly what kind of predator he really is. How are they doing? The other women? Better now that they know Roberto will face justice. For years we all blamed ourselves and wondered if we'd ever get closure. Your courage in fighting back gave all of us hope. That evening, Natasha's phone rang constantly. Reporters had learned about the case and wanted interviews. Agent Chin had warned her this might happen as the investigation became public. Mrs. Torres, this is Sandra Mitchell from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about the Roberto Torres fraud case. I'm sorry, but I can't comment during an active investigation. Similar calls came throughout the evening. The story was attracting national attention as the scope of Roberto's crimes became clear. Monica came over with takeout dinner and helped Natasha screen calls. You're famous, honey? Not exactly how you planned to get on television. I never wanted attention. I just wanted Roberto to face consequences for what he did. Well, he's about to face them in a very public way. Agent Chin says this case could be studied in law schools as an example of how to build financial fraud prosecutions. They tried to watch a movie, but Natasha couldn't concentrate. Tomorrow, Roberto would hopefully be arrested. The man who had destroyed her life and the lives of so many other women would finally face justice. Monica, what if he gets away? What if he escapes to another country and disappears forever? He won't. You've helped the FBI build an airtight case with evidence from multiple states and victims. Even if he runs, he'll never be safe anywhere. As Natasha prepared for bed, she thought about the past 2 months. 8 weeks ago, she had been a trusting wife who believed in her marriage. Tonight, she was a federal witness whose testimony would help convict a career criminal. Roberto had intended to destroy her life and disappear without consequences. Instead, his betrayal had revealed her own strength and determination. Tomorrow he would learn exactly how costly his mistake had been. The predator was about to become the prey. Saturday morning began with Agent Chin calling at 6 o'clock. Mrs. Torres, Roberto and Victoria never showed up for their flight to Costa Rica. Airport security waited all night, but they're in the wind again. Natasha's heart sank. Do you think they knew about the surveillance? Possibly. Roberto's smart and paranoid. He may have spotted law enforcement or changed plans at the last minute. So they escaped? Not escaped. Delayed. We've frozen every account we can identify, issued federal warrants, and alerted border security at all international departure points. They're running out of resources and options. 2 hours later, Natasha sat in the FBI command center watching agents coordinate the manhunt. Multiple screens showed security camera footage from airports, hotels, and car rental agencies across Florida. Roberto made a mistake, Agent Williams announced. He used his real driver's license to rent a car in Tampa yesterday. We have the license plate and vehicle description. Detective Morrison joined the briefing. All law enforcement agencies in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama have the vehicle information. Roberto can't drive anywhere without risk of being spotted. Agent Chen pulled Natasha aside. Mrs. Torres, I want you to prepare for the possibility that Roberto might try to contact you. Criminals sometimes reach out to victims when they feel trapped. Contact me? Why would he do that? To try manipulation or threats. He might claim innocence, blame others, or even threaten revenge if you don't withdraw your cooperation. Would he really threaten me? Men like Roberto become desperate when facing long prison sentences. We've arranged protection for you just in case. The afternoon brought more developments. Gas station security cameras captured Roberto and Victoria in northern Florida, driving south toward Miami again. They looked tired and stressed, constantly checking their surroundings. They're making mistakes now, Agent Chen observed. Using credit cards, staying in places with security cameras, driving predictable routes. Desperation makes criminals careless. Detective Morrison received a call from Miami police. Roberto used an ATM in downtown Miami 30 minutes ago. Police units are responding to the area. The command center erupted with activity. Agents coordinated with local police, mapped escape routes, and prepared arrest teams. Natasha watched the operation with fascination and nervousness. Mrs. Torres, Agent Williams called out, Roberto just tried to withdraw money from your joint account. The transaction was declined because we froze it, but the ATM recorded his location. He's still trying to steal from me even while running from the FBI? Criminals often fall back on familiar patterns when under stress. Roberto's desperation is showing. Evening brought the break they'd been waiting for. A hotel desk clerk in Miami Beach recognized Roberto and Victoria from news reports and called police. They checked in using fake names but paid with a credit card we've been monitoring, Agent Chen explained. Miami police have the hotel surrounded. Natasha watched live news coverage from the hotel. Police cars with flashing lights surrounded an upscale beachfront property. Reporters described it as the culmination of a multi-state manhunt for accused financial criminals. This is really happening, Monica said, squeezing Natasha's hand. Roberto's finally going to face what he deserves. Agent Chen's phone rang. She answered quickly, then turned to address the room. Roberto and Victoria are in custody. No resistance. They're being transported to federal holding facilities for processing. The command center erupted in cheers and applause. Detective Morrison shook Natasha's hand. Mrs. Torres, your courage made this possible. Roberto Torres would still be out there destroying lives if you hadn't fought back. But Natasha felt strangely empty. She had imagined this moment would bring immediate relief or satisfaction. Instead, she felt drained and sad. Justice was important, but it couldn't repair the damage Roberto had done to her ability to trust or give her back 8 years of her life. How do you feel? Monica asked. Tired, relieved, but also sad that any of this had to happen. That evening, news reports covered Roberto's arrest extensively. The story had captured national attention as details emerged about his multi-state crime spree and the victims who had helped build the case against him. Federal authorities say this case represents one of the most sophisticated marriage fraud schemes ever prosecuted, the news anchor reported. The accused faces dozens of charges and could receive a life sentence if convicted. Natasha's phone rang constantly with interview requests, but she wasn't ready to speak publicly. The legal process was just beginning, and she needed time to process everything that had happened. Agent Chen says the trial will probably start in about 6 months, she told Monica. 6 months of reliving everything Roberto did and testifying about the most painful period of my life. But also 6 months of knowing he's locked up and can't hurt anyone else. As Natasha prepared for bed in her quiet house, she realized something important had changed. For the first time in 2 months she felt truly safe. Roberto was in custody, his criminal enterprise was destroyed, and justice was finally within reach. The man who had underestimated her strength was about to spend decades in prison regretting that mistake. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in February. Natasha walked up the courthouse steps flanked by Agent Chin and Detective Morrison, facing a crowd of reporters and photographers. The case had attracted national media attention as the scope of Roberto's crimes became public. "Mrs. Torres, how do you feel about facing your ex-husband in court?" a reporter shouted. Natasha kept walking without comment, following Agent Chen's advice to save her words for the jury. Inside the courtroom, she saw Roberto for the first time since finding his cruel note. He sat at the defense table in an orange jail jumpsuit, looking thinner and older than she remembered. When their eyes met briefly, she felt nothing. No love, no hate, just empty recognition of a stranger who had pretended to be her husband. Victoria Rodriguez sat at a separate defense table with her own attorney. The sisters had been charged separately, and Vanessa Rodriguez was scheduled for trial later in the year. Federal prosecutor Amanda Silva opened with a statement that laid out Roberto's crimes in devastating detail. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Roberto Torres is not a man who made mistakes in love. He is a career criminal who spent 7 years systematically destroying the lives of innocent women while stealing millions of dollars from employers and clients who trusted him." The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Financial records, email communications, victim testimonies, and expert analysis painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal enterprise designed to steal money and destroy lives. Natasha testified on the second day, walking the jury through her 8-year marriage and the discovery of Roberto's betrayal. She spoke calmly and clearly, despite the emotional difficulty of reliving those painful months. "He wrote that he had never loved me anyway," she told the jury. "But the evidence shows he never loved anyone. Roberto Torres is incapable of love because he sees other people as tools to be used and discarded." Roberto's defense attorney tried to portray him as a man who had made poor personal choices but wasn't a hardened criminal. The strategy failed completely when the prosecutor introduced evidence of Roberto's previous victims. Linda Patterson testified about her experience in Kansas City. Then came testimonies from Seattle, Portland, Phoenix, and Denver. Each woman told essentially the same story of manipulation, theft, and abandonment. "Roberto Torres has left a trail of destroyed lives across this country," Prosecutor Silva told the jury. "He is a predator who targets vulnerable women, steals their money, and disappears without regard for the damage he causes." The most damaging evidence came from Roberto's own communications. Emails with Victoria Rodriguez showed cold, calculated planning of each crime. "The target in Phoenix has excellent credit and a substantial savings account," Roberto had written. "She'll be perfect for our next operation." Victoria Rodriguez took the stand in her own defense, trying to claim she was also a victim of Roberto's manipulation. But Prosecutor Silva destroyed her credibility with evidence showing Victoria had helped plan and execute multiple fraud schemes. "Ms. Rodriguez, you personally helped Roberto target and destroy at least 6 women over 5 years. How is that being a victim?" "I loved him," Victoria replied weakly. "I thought we were building a future together." A future built on stolen money and destroyed lives? The trial lasted 3 weeks. Expert witnesses explained the sophisticated financial techniques Roberto had used to hide stolen money. FBI agents testified about the multi-state investigation. Company executives described the damage Roberto had done to their businesses and clients. Throughout the trial, Roberto showed no emotion or remorse. He sat silently as victim after victim described how his crimes had devastated their lives. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. On the charge of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of mail fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of identity theft, we find the defendant guilty. The guilty verdicts continued through all 23 federal charges. Roberto Torres was convicted on every count. Victoria Rodriguez was found guilty on 18 charges of conspiracy and fraud. At sentencing 2 months later, Natasha addressed the court directly. "Your Honor, Roberto Torres didn't just steal money from me. He stole 8 years of my life, my ability to trust, and my faith in love itself. But he also underestimated my strength. His crimes brought together victims from across the country who refused to let him escape justice." Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Roberto Torres to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Victoria Rodriguez received 22 years. "Mr. Torres," Judge Williams said, "you are a predator who has caused immeasurable harm to numerous victims. Your crimes were sophisticated, deliberate, and showed complete disregard for human suffering. Society needs protection from individuals like you." Roberto finally showed emotion, breaking down as the reality of spending the rest of his life in prison hit him. Outside the courthouse, Natasha spoke to reporters for the first time. This case isn't just about one woman's divorce gone wrong. Roberto Torres was a career criminal who destroyed lives across multiple states. Justice was served today not just for me but for every woman he victimized. Agent Chin stood beside her. Mrs. Torres showed incredible courage in fighting back against a sophisticated criminal. Her determination to seek justice helped law enforcement build a case that will prevent Roberto Torres from ever hurting anyone again. That evening, Natasha celebrated with Monica, Detective Morrison, Agent Chin, and Linda Patterson at a quiet restaurant downtown. "So what happens now?" Linda asked. "Now we rebuild our lives," Natasha replied. "Roberto took a lot from all of us, but he didn't break us. We're stronger than he ever imagined." As the celebration wound down, Detective Morrison asked Natasha about her future plans. "I'm thinking about starting my own financial consulting business, helping people protect themselves from fraud and identity theft." "That sounds perfect," Agent Chin said. "You understand these crimes better than most experts." Driving home through the city lights, Natasha reflected on the past year. Roberto's betrayal had been devastating, but fighting back had revealed strength she never knew she possessed. Justice had been served, and she was ready to build a new life on her own terms. Roberto Torres would spend the rest of his life in prison, regretting the day he decided to underestimate her. 6 months after the trial, Natasha stood in her new office overlooking downtown, hanging her business license on the wall. Torres Financial Security Consulting had grown from an idea born of pain into a thriving practice helping fraud victims and teaching prevention strategies. Detective Morrison knocked on her office door carrying coffee and a warm smile that had become familiar over the past few months. "How's the new business owner feeling?" "Nervous but excited," Natasha replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I never imagined Roberto's betrayal would lead to something positive." Their relationship had developed naturally over the months of working together on the case. James Morrison was everything Roberto had pretended to be: honest, supportive, and genuinely caring. But Natasha had learned to trust slowly and value authenticity over charm. "The FBI sent over another case file," James said, setting a folder on her desk. "A woman in Baltimore whose husband disappeared with their savings. Agent Chin thinks you could help." Natasha opened the file, recognizing the familiar pattern immediately. Joint accounts emptied, mysterious late nights, a cruel goodbye note. Another woman whose life had been destroyed by someone she trusted completely. "I'll call her today. No one should go through this alone." Over the past months, Natasha had consulted on dozens of fraud cases, helping law enforcement understand the psychological and financial patterns that predators like Roberto used. Her insights had led to several arrests and convictions. "There's something else," James said, looking nervous. "The FBI wants to offer you a consulting position. Full-time work helping with financial fraud investigations." "Really?" "Agent Chin says you have a natural talent for understanding these crimes. Plus, your background as a victim gives you credibility that career agents sometimes lack." Natasha considered the offer while looking out her office window at the busy street below. A year ago, she had been a trusting wife whose biggest concern was choosing paint colors for their kitchen. Now she was a recognized expert in financial fraud who had helped convict a career criminal. "What do you think I should do?" "Whatever makes you happy," James replied. "You've proven you can succeed at anything you set your mind to." That evening, Monica joined them for dinner at the Italian restaurant where Natasha had once celebrated her wedding anniversary with Roberto. The painful memories had been replaced by new ones built on genuine friendship and honest love. "So Agent Chin really wants to hire you full-time?" Monica asked. "She says the FBI needs people who understand both the financial and emotional aspects of these crimes. Most agents are great at following money trails but struggle to connect with victims. It sounds like the perfect job for you. You could help so many people." James raised his wine glass. To Natasha Torres, who turned the worst betrayal imaginable into a force for justice. As they toasted, Natasha thought about Roberto sitting in his federal prison cell. The man who had written that he never loved her anyway was spending every day regretting his decision to underestimate her strength. The recovered money from Roberto's offshore accounts had been distributed to his victims. Natasha received full restitution for her stolen funds, plus additional compensation from asset forfeiture. But more importantly, she had gained something invaluable: the knowledge that she was capable of fighting back against any challenge life might bring. "I have an announcement," she said, setting down her wine glass. "I'm accepting the FBI position. And James, I'd like you to consider partnering with me on a consulting firm that specializes in marriage fraud cases." Partners in crime fighting? James smiled. I like the sound of that. 6 weeks later, Natasha received a letter forwarded from her old address. The return address showed it came from the federal prison where Roberto was serving his sentence. She almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page written in Roberto's familiar handwriting. Natasha, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed you to know that I was wrong about everything. You weren't too trusting or not smart enough to understand what was happening. You were exactly what I wrote in my goodbye note. You never meant anything to me because I was incapable of caring about anyone. But watching you fight back and destroy my entire operation taught me something I never learned before. You were always stronger than me. You were always better than me. I spent years thinking I was superior to my victims, but you proved that the victims were the strong ones. I hope you've built a good life without me. You deserve everything I was too damaged to give you. Roberto. Natasha read the letter twice, then filed it away. Roberto's apology didn't change anything he had done, but it confirmed what she had learned about herself. She was stronger than he had believed, smarter than he had calculated, and more resilient than anyone had imagined. 3 months later, James proposed during a quiet weekend at the beach. The ring was simple and elegant, nothing like the flashy diamond Roberto had used to seal his deception years earlier. I love you for exactly who you are, James said as he knelt in the sand. Your strength, your intelligence, your determination to help others. Will you marry me? Natasha looked at this good man who had seen her at her worst and loved her through her healing. Who supported her career ambitions and celebrated her victories. Who never tried to change her or make her doubt herself. Yes, she said, knowing with complete certainty that this love was real. Their wedding 6 months later was small and perfect. Monica served as maid of honor, Agent Chen attended as a friend rather than a federal agent, and Linda Patterson flew in from Kansas City to celebrate the woman whose courage had given them all justice. As Natasha danced with her new husband in the garden behind their favorite restaurant, she thought about the note Roberto had left on their bed 2 years earlier. He had written that their marriage was a mistake and he had never loved her anyway. He was right about one thing. Their marriage had been a mistake, but only because he had been incapable of recognizing what he was destroying. Roberto Torres would spend the rest of his life in prison, remembering the woman who had been strong enough to bring down his entire criminal empire. The woman he had foolishly underestimated. Natasha Morrison was living proof that sometimes the best revenge is building a life so successful and happy that your enemies regret ever crossing you. She had won in every way that mattered.